It is hypothesized that all life began with a single cell. These single-celled organisms lived for hundreds of millions of years, and still do today, as bacteria, yeast, and other microbes, before evolving into early multicellular organisms. If we jump forward in time, these simple, multicellular organisms evolved into the plants, fish, insects, reptiles, other animals, and eventually primates and the human species. Most life still goes through a single-cell stage. Each of us, for example, started as two cells, an oocyte from mom and a sperm cell from dad, fusing into a single-celled zygote. The single cell then proceeded to divide into daughter cells, which divided again into more cells. The result? The complex, multicellular organisms we know and love.
What is cancer? Cancer starts with one cell. You know, our cells have mechanisms in them that allow them to divide. My twin granddaughters over in another room, they were premature. I could hold them in my hand when they were born. And now they're, I don't know, they weigh 40 or 50 pounds. By the time they're finished, they're going to weigh, I hope, no more than 120 pounds or so. But so they grow, and they grow because their cells are dividing. And there are mechanisms in those cells that allow them to divide. But sometimes a cell stops dividing. And we're not really sure exactly why that is either, but that's what causes cancer, is that one cell starts dividing and it loses the control is lost. Not only does it continue to divide, but it never dies. It only dies when the individual dies. And in fact, there are some cancer cells that have been put in culture that have been in existence for, God, 40 years or so. So these cancer cells are immortal, basically. And if you only have an organism with one cell, and that organism is only going to live for, like a bacterium, for a month or so, it's not going to be around long enough to develop cancer. But when you have a multicellular organism like us, and we're living now 50, 60, 80, 100 years, that's a lot of time and a lot of cells. We have billions of cells, and there's a lot of opportunity for that mechanism to maintain control over cell division to go wrong, and for cells to just start dividing, or a cell to start dividing without control and becoming cancer.
Cancer is a leading cause of death around the world, and many people today believe cancer is a man-made disease. Most people think pollution and diet are the main causes for this incurable killer, yet historical evidence proves these suspicions are false. And in fact, cancer has been around for a long time and is found in many species, and long before the evolution and emergence of humans.
Using modern technology, such as CT scans, paleontologists have been able to discover tumors in several species of dinosaurs. At the Carnegie Museum of Natural History, these paleontologists examined dinosaur fossils using CT scanning and have discovered the oldest known cancer tumor, lodged in a 150 million-year-old dinosaur bone. This particular type of cancer was identified as osteosarcoma, a type of bone cancer which can develop during childhood.
As the time of the dinosaurs slowly came to an end, the era of mammals began. The first recorded account of cancer was in ancient Egypt in 1600 BC. This account was written on papyrus and described breast cancer in an adult female. By 1500 BC, a papyrus was written describing cancers and the treatments for them.
Through the use of modern technology once again, we are able to use CT scanning to diagnose the cause of death of some ancient mummies. Researchers at the Carnegie Museum of Natural History collaborated with the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center to scan this child mummy, now on display at the museum, along with other mummies the museum is given permission to examine. This child mummy's death was not due to cancer. However, 4 other mummies to date have had a type of cancer, which is believed to have contributed to their death.
For pathologists, reality is kind of what you see under the microscope. And in examining all these specimens, and I've examined a couple of hundred mummies by now, I've only seen 3 cases that I could diagnose as cancer in mummies. And one benign tumor, which is not really a cancer, and then 2 malignancies, two cancers, one cancer of the colon and one cancer of the urinary bladder.
Moving forward on the historical timeline, many different civilizations would come in contact with the disease of cancer, even if they were unable to realize what it truly was.
But many of these other cancers, they could and did in fact diagnose. What they didn't really know was exactly what it was or how to treat it.
Hippocrates described several kinds of cancers. Since it was against Greek tradition to open the body, Hippocrates only described and made drawings of outwardly visible tumors on the skin, nose, and breasts. The German zoologist Theodor Boveri recognized the genetic basis of cancer in 1902. He suggested that mutations of the chromosomes could generate a cell with unlimited growth potential, which could be passed onto its descendants.
When Marie Curie and Pierre Curie discovered the first radioactive element at the end of the 19th century, they stumbled upon the first effective non-surgical cancer treatment. With radiation also came the first signs of multidisciplinary approaches to cancer treatment. Continuously, treatments and cures for cancer are being investigated, and there have been many leaps and bounds in these procedures, particularly since the beginning of the 21st century. The links between ancient cancer and modern-day cancer will be able to assist in making even more discoveries about cancer, and perhaps how to find a cure.
After examining all of this historical evidence, it is clear that the intuition that cancer is man-made is misinformed. Although certain environmental exposures, for example, cigarette smoking, radiation exposure, and chemical mutagens, can significantly increase a person's risk.
I think of my research is that it's a disease that has been greatly increased in incidence over the last, really just since the middle of the 20th century, that's the last 60 years. Why is that? It's an easy answer: cigarette smoking. There are two other factors. One is pollution, environmental pollution, which largely relating to the petrochemical industry. You can take a map of the United States and just show where cancers occur, and there's always a much higher incidence in areas where there's a large petrochemical industry. The lower Mississippi River Valley area, the area in Texas where there's a lot of oil industry. And radiation. There's much more radiation in our environment than there ever was. We had all the atom bomb tests that went on back when I was growing up, when my teachers in my third grade class would say, "Okay, kids, let's practice duck and cover." We were literally, believe it or not, supposed to go under our desks, and that was going to protect us from an atom bomb. Well, it doesn't work that way, but there's a lot of radiation that was released. We have a lot of medical x-rays that are released now. There used to be a treatment for tuberculosis where they would collapse the lung that had tuberculosis, and the idea was that this would allow it to heal. And the way they monitored this was they x-rayed the patients, and they only x-rayed the side that was collapsed. And there was an increased incidence of lung cancer on that side. So radiation does cause cancer. And we see all of these things now in a modern society that, well, certainly they didn't have radiation to any significant extent in the past. They didn't smoke cigarettes, which I refer to as the Indians' revenge. And they had really no pollution from the petrochemical industries.
Cancer as a disease has always been a risk of multicellular life. Modern societies might benefit from a better understanding of the history of this disease, which has been around long before the origin of the human species. Only then will they be able to focus on preventing and curing this killer.